Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for All Stars 10 episode 3, and the guests this week were DeJa, Sky and Irene the Alien. Today we're going to be talking about Irene calls out her former drag daughter Arrietty. Arrietty then made some serious accusations against Irene. And Irene and DeJa reveal what production did to the queens after the fallout at the beginning of this week's episode. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Also, just before we dive in, you may remember that a while back I was invited to become an official Paramount Plus affiliate partner, and some people in the comments have asked where they can watch All Stars 10, and the answer is you can watch it on Paramount Plus. So if you want to check out Paramount Plus and sign up for a free trial, please use my link, which you'll find in the description and also in the pinned comment. And I'd greatly appreciate it, as I do receive a small kickback from every sign up, and it's a great way to support the channel while also getting a free trial to watch a mountain of entertainment, including shows like RuPaul's Drag Race as well as many others. So they started off by asking DeJa and Irene what it was like being back on Drag Race and in the workroom. Irene joked that this was basically her first time because she was first eliminated on her original season, and she really likes everyone in her bracket. She also said it was cool to do well on Drag Race because, quote, I had never experienced that before. DeJa said for her it felt, quote, correct to be back and she should be there, and even though she was still healing from her surgery, she wanted to go back and prove that she is an even better queen than she was on season 14. Host Naysha Lopez said a lot of queens said no to All Stars 10 because they didn't understand the format with the brackets, or they just didn't like the format, so she asked if it was an easy decision for DeJa and Irene to say yes. Irene joked that she was in, quote, no position to say no to anything, and everyone laughed. DeJa said for her it wasn't an immediate yes, and she had to think about it for a day because she was still healing, but she thought why not, because it's only 3 guaranteed episodes, so you don't have to spend as much on outfits as you would on a regular season. They then talked about the beginning of this week's episode when the queens gave out their MVQ points, and Aja was annoyed because she gave her point to Olivia, but Olivia gave her point to DeJa, even though Aja and Olivia were supposed to have an alliance. Irene explained that the interesting thing was they filmed that part of the episode on a Friday. Then, over the weekend, production made sure the queens were not allowed to talk to each other and they were kept separate. Irene added that usually the queens were allowed to hang out and go on smoke breaks together and things like that, but this particular weekend they weren't allowed because, quote, they didn't want anybody to resolve the conflict. This meant that Aja and Olivia were still stewing on this all weekend until they came back to film on Monday. DeJa said that when they came back to film, she thought everyone was cool, but when they were in the van going to set, Aja said, quote, everyone, no hard feelings about today, implying that something was about to happen, and everyone was really confused. DeJa also added that Phoenix, quote, would not look at me, and DeJa was confused because she had asked Phoenix if there was a problem on the Friday, and Phoenix said no, but DeJa joked that on the Monday, quote, there was a problem. And this was because Phoenix said she felt that it was shady that the others had alliances, and no one had given Phoenix a point even though she only has 1 point. Also, they kept referring to what happened at the beginning of the episode as, quote, the fallout, and DeJa joked about that name, and then Irene said, quote, that's what the producers called it. The other host, Caramel, said that some people were worried that with only 3 episodes we wouldn't get much drama, but the queens so far have delivered with the drama. Irene then said, quote, wait till the next effing bracket, B-word, and everyone laughed. Naysha added that she's, quote, heard a few things about that too. DeJa also joked that when she left filming, she hoped that the episodes would be fun when people watched them back because she didn't think there was that much drama, but now watching it back, quote, I was mother effing wrong. They discussed this confrontation in the workroom a bit more, and Naysha said usually these conversations go on a lot longer than what was shown in the edit, and asked if anything was cut out. DeJa said it got, quote, extremely heated. Irene said she was sat there eating popcorn while it happened, and it sort of got cut out of the episode, but you can briefly see it in one of the wider shots. Irene said there's so much that happened, but she's not sure if she can say anything. Naysha said, quote, "You absolutely can, I checked," and everyone laughed. But Irene joked that she doesn't want to get into trouble and she doesn't believe Naysha. However, Irene said she would keep it vague and said, quote, "After the conversation, not everybody wanted to continue in the competition," and people in the audience gasped. The other host, Batty Davis, asked if it was, quote, "one of the white girls," and DeJa said no. DeJa also clarified it wasn't her. Naysha guessed that it must be Olivia, and both Irene and DeJa said Naysha was making all kinds of assumptions, but they didn't confirm or deny who it was. Naysha also asked DeJa what her thought process was on giving her MVQ point to Olivia. DeJa explained she had an alliance with Olivia, and she had no idea that Aja and Olivia also had an alliance. But in hindsight, because Phoenix helped DeJa in the last episode, DeJa said she should have given her point to Phoenix. DeJa also said she wanted to address something, and she revealed that although she's lucky that she doesn't tend to get a ton of hate mail, she did get a DM from someone after this week's episode saying that the fact that DeJa chose who she gave her point to based on skin colour was, quote, "despicable." But DeJa said that she will, quote, "never apologise for wanting a melanated person to be in the top." She also explained that a person of colour has it harder right off the bat, and that was the whole goal of the melanation station, to make sure that one of them was in the top, and everyone clapped and cheered for DeJa. They moved on, and Naysha asked Irene how preparing for All Stars was different than preparing for her original season, especially as she went home first. Irene said that she spent twice the amount on these 3 episodes that she did for her entire season 15 runway package. This was because she knew what it felt like to spend lots of money and then not get to show everything. So when she found out that they would get to show everything for these 3 episodes, she wanted to make sure that she showed that this is what you would have seen if she had stayed on season 15. Cara then said that one of the VIPs had a question, which was, what do the queens think of the new format of this season, and what do they like about it, and what do they not like about it? DeJa said she's going to be honest, the thing she liked is that because there's only 6 people in the room at once, quote, there is no chance that someone's going to be hidden and someone's going to be under-edited. Because with a big cast, there are a lot of personalities going on, but with a smaller cast, you each get a good amount of airtime and storylines, which is what she loves about this format. Irene said she thinks that for several seasons now, the producers have been trying to work out a way to make sure that, quote, All Stars is worth going back for, and they don't want the queens to spend lots of money on outfits but then don't get to actually use them. And they've tried several things like non-elimination seasons, but the fans didn't like it because there were no stakes. Then they did things like the Fame Games on All Stars 8, but the queens didn't really like it, which Naysha agreed with and said that it was, quote, stupid as F. So Irene feels that this new format is a, quote, happy medium between all of those things. They moved on to this week's episode where they had to give makeovers to basketball players, and because Irene won the mini challenge, she got to decide the pairings. Batty said that Irene's choices seemed to be quite fair, but DeJa said, quote, oh, work, and people gasped and laughed. DeJa laughed and said she's already said this to Irene, but full transparency, she would have, quote, loved someone who was my complexion. However, her partner Abby was, quote, perfect because she was up for anything. So although DeJa was anxious at first because they have different complexions, she was actually really happy that she got Abby as her partner. Irene explained that the reason for her choices were because the last 2 were Abby and Lauren, and Irene knew that all of the queens had prepared makeover looks, and Abby's body type was more similar to DeJa's, and Lauren's body type was more similar to Bosco's, which meant that they were more likely to fit into the makeover outfits that the queens had already brought with them. They moved on, and Cara said, we've seen some queens such as DeJa who have alliances, but she asked if Irene has an alliance with anyone. Irene said yes and said that she and Bosco would go back to the hotel and, quote, make the handlers let us have a smoke break together every night where we would just talk strategy. However, Irene added that she and Bosco never discussed the alliance on camera because they're smart and they knew that if they did, the producers would have put them in a position where they had to choose between each other or another girl. Naysha asked if she's right in thinking that both Irene and Bosco live in Seattle, and Irene said yes, and she said that they actually live down the street from each other and they've been friends for ages. Naysha also asked if the two of them had called each other to ask if they got the call for All Stars 10, and Irene nodded. Naysha asked if they knew that they were going to be in the same bracket, and Irene said, quote, oh girl, we were sharing designers. They talked more about this week's challenge, which was the Makeover challenge, but they also had to write, record and perform verses to the song Shoot Your Shot. DeJa questioned why they didn't get them to do a basketball look or some kind of sports-related look, and implied that it was a bit odd that they all had such different types of outfits. Caramel also said that it was weird that they made the Makeover partners perform in their runway outfits. DeJa also confirmed that they only had one day to do all of the preparation for this challenge, so it was very quick. Irene added that even Jamal Sims, the choreographer, when they were practicing, he said, quote, damn, we did not give y'all enough time. They moved on to the runways, and DeJa said she had some tea to spill about her outfits. DeJa explained that she originally had two, quote, gorgeous custom-made corseted looks for the makeover, but because her partner was short and not DeJa's size, DeJa said she doesn't know how to take in corsets, so they couldn't use those outfits because they didn't fit. But DeJa had these two other looks which she used instead. And originally, DeJa's partner was supposed to be in the Galinda pink outfit, but she asked to try on the green one instead, and she loved it because of the black hair and she wanted to do something totally different, so she and DeJa ended up switching outfits. DeJa said about the outfits, quote, was it the most inspirational thing ever? No, but she thinks that they looked good. They had also said earlier that something similar happened to Bosco and her partner, and Bosco's partner preferred the outfit that Bosco was originally going to wear, so they ended up switching as well. DeJa then said about her partner shaving her eyebrows, she came into the workroom and told DeJa that she sweats profusely through her brows. DeJa hadn't planned to shave her eyebrows, but because she said that she sweats so much through her eyebrows it would ruin the makeup, DeJa asked her if it was okay to shave them off, and her partner said absolutely. Also, while we're talking about DeJa's outfits, I saw some tea outside of Roscoe's that's also related to this topic. DeJa recently shared a few videos on TikTok where she explained that for the coming and going runway, she hired a designer to make the outfit and she had been admiring this designer for a long time. She paid for the outfit, but the designer was not very communicative. There was a sketch for the outfit and DeJa showed it, and DeJa kept asking for progress photos of the outfit, but she didn't get any, and it kept getting closer and closer to the filming deadline. Finally, DeJa got some photos of the outfit, and she was obviously not very happy with the end product of how it looked compared to the sketch.
Keep in mind this is the original sketch, okay? Keep that in your mind. It looks nothing like the sketch. The colors are off. There's no waist. I was shook. I was so shook.
She also said that it had ropes as straps to hold it up, and she wasn't happy with what she paid for.
In order for it to stay on, he used ropes for the arms. Ropes. Just a cheap rope. When I put this on, I felt frumpy. I did not feel good at all.
DeJa explained that she only had a few days before she had to go and film, so a friend of hers who's a designer, who she's worked with before, said that they would try and make some changes to the outfit and try and salvage it. And after DeJa posted these videos on TikTok, I did see some comments saying that they didn't think the original look was that bad, to which DeJa replied and said, I mean, each to their own. Then someone else in a comment said, it's fine though, maybe couture is not just on DeJa's style. And DeJa replied saying, then when I wear it, y'all read me, there's literally no winning. And I just thought this was interesting context because we've heard many times before that queens have had issues with designers and they end up paying but not receiving what they wanted. And this often affects the queen's run on the show. Anyway, back to Roscoe's, and Cara said it seemed that all of the makeover partners were comfortable with everything and asked if there was any hesitation from any of the partners. Irene and DeJa said Phoenix's partner, Heron, didn't really want to do certain things, which is why DeJa was so glad that her partner was down for everything. Irene also shared that production wheeled out a rack of pads, undergarments and breasts that they can use for the makeovers, and they just keep them in the studio between seasons. But Irene said because they've been used by multiple makeover partners over the years, they were, quote, soaked into, crusty and gross as F. They then got to the part of the episode when Irene won the challenge and everyone clapped and cheered for Irene. They asked Irene how it felt, and Irene said she knows it sounds really petty, but she felt like saying, quote, F you to everyone who was counting me out because I was the first out. Irene also said that all drag queens have egos, and she went into season 15 thinking that she was that girl, and even after her elimination she still felt like that, but no one got to see it. But then, after doing so well on All Stars 10, she said she couldn't wait for people to find out how sickening she is. They then talked about the moment when the bottom 4 queens gave out their MVQ points. DeJa said they only had a few seconds between leaving untucked and then having to do their MVQ points. Irene said it was really, quote, big-brained of the producers to make the queens write down the names so that the queens couldn't strategize or change their answers. DeJa then said, quote, and then the lineup is, yeah. And Naysha agreed and said that did you notice who was the first in the lineup and who was last? And DeJa nodded and slightly sarcastically said, quote, wild. Later, Cara asked Naysha would she ever go back to All Stars if they had the same format as this season. Naysha said, quote, oh, absolutely not, and everyone laughed. Naysha added, quote, F Drag Race, I'm over it, I love it, I'm a fan, I will watch forever, will I compete again? F no. Naysha said that she is not a masochist and it, quote, just doesn't work for me. And she's fully accepted that, and the way that she competes on the show doesn't define her or her talent. She explained that she is a, quote, perfectionist, but the people who do the best on the show are the people who, quote, colour outside of the lines. Naysha added that they edit the queens to fit the narrative they want, and Naysha said on her All-Stars, she was doing things like running around the workroom being silly, and she was also joking with RuPaul during the main stage critiques, but none of that was shown because it didn't fit the narrative they were trying to portray for her. They moved on and talked about the critiques for this week, and that Michelle said that some of the outfits looked a bit, quote, costumey. Interestingly, Irene said that she also got the same critique, but they just didn't include it in the episode. Cara then asked another VIP question, which was, how did the queens in bracket 1 feel that they sort of got one less episode than the other brackets because it was a double premiere, so they only had 2 weeks rather than 3? And if you've watched my Have Your Say for last week, you'll know that DeJa already talked about this in a live video, saying that they were all annoyed and vented their frustrations to the network, but she said the network doesn't care about the queen's well-being and they only care about views. And if you want to know more about that, I'll link to that video in the description. But in terms of what DeJa said at Roscoe's, she sort of said the same thing, and she said, quote, we were mother effing peed. However, Irene said she thinks that it's balanced because the premiere is always the most watched episode of the season, so although they only got 2 weeks technically, it probably still evened out with the other episodes because it was the premiere. DeJa said, quote, who said that, kind of sarcastically, and people laughed. DeJa explained that her issue was that when you go back on All Stars, you go back so that you can get booked. And promoters tend to start booking queens partway through the season, so if you're only on 2 weeks at the start of the season, you're not going to be seen anymore, and that's why she was, quote, highly upset. But she agreed that Irene has a point about the premiere episode getting the highest viewership of the season, and in fact, the premiere of All Stars 10 had the highest viewing figures since All Stars 7. They moved on and started talking about the queens in the other brackets, and they brought up Mistress Isabel Brooks and how shady she is. Irene joked that, quote, if you love your mental health, competing with Mistress is not something you should do. Naysha joked that Mistress sometimes says stuff that makes you want to pull your wig off and swing on her because, quote, she really knows how to get under people's skin and it's a talent. Irene said Mistress admitted to her that, quote, I don't believe there is a line. And Irene joked and said, quote, that's your effing problem, there is a line. DeJa said she worked with Mistress for months on Work the World, and Mistress is, quote, effing wild. Later on, they said something kind of interesting, which was about the guest judge for this week, who is actress Kate Beckinsale. Irene said that she is a, quote, total hag and goes out all the time, and she's actually very good friends with Drag Race UK queen Bag of Chips. And apparently Kate has a bunch of pictures of drag queens in her house. After that, they were talking about supporting the queens on the season, and Cara had a question for Irene, which is that she's the drag mother of season 17 contestant Arrietty, so did Irene help Arrietty get ready for her season? DeJa started laughing and shifting in her chair, and Irene just said, quote, no comment, and everyone gasped and laughed. Naysha said that she wanted to comment because she had heard something about this, but she didn't. Just to explain for those of you who may not know, Arrietty was Irene's drag daughter, and there are photos of them together online. However, when Arrietty was announced as being cast on season 17, there were online rumours saying that Arrietty and Irene had fallen out and they were no longer drag related. There were also some other rumours saying that Arrietty had fallen out with multiple queens in the local scene. However, these were just rumours, so this may not be true. However, it did seem that Irene and Arrietty were no longer on speaking terms, and what Irene said at Roscoe's seems to confirm this. There was also some tea that happened about this situation outside of Roscoe's. As you may know, Mistress Isabel Brooks has a YouTube channel, and she posts funny videos where she often talks to other Drag Race queens and they talk about other queens. Well, in Mistress's most recent video, she was interviewing queens at the All Stars 10 premiere, and one of the queens was Irene. In the video, Mistress asked Irene what her relationship is like with Arrietty, and Irene made it clear that they are no longer related, and confirmed there are clearly issues between the two of them. Here is what Irene said.
This first question, it says, are you still associated with Arrietty?
No.
Okay, they said, if so or not, why did you let Arrietty go on Drag Race without any skills other than sewing garments?
I actually gave her a whole rundown on what she should be doing on the show, and she didn't listen to me.
How would you describe your situation, your relationship with Arrietty? Because that was or is your daughter.
Not any longer. That's not, no.
Is it, you think it could be saved?
No, I will say this. I never forgive someone who f***s with my money, my character, or my man.
As you can imagine, this clip from Mistress's video went viral on social media, with lots of people posting and commenting on it, and multiple people even tagged Arrietty asking what happened between her and Irene. It seems that Arrietty must have seen the clip, because Arrietty tweeted shortly afterwards saying, if y'all only knew the real tea, I'ma keep it cute because I'm trying to grow. Arrietty then seemingly made a joke about what Irene had said about Arrietty messing with her money, character, or her man, because Arrietty then put a poll up on her Twitter saying, now I want to hear from the fans, which one do y'all think I effed with? Also, I thought this was the end of the drama. However, overnight after I recorded the first part of this video, Arrietty seems to have posted a lot more information, including what seemed like some serious accusations against Irene. Arrietty deleted all of these tweets quite soon after she posted them, so I didn't see them myself. However, people have posted screenshots all over Reddit and Twitter, which is how I was able to get copies of them. And I decided to wait with publishing this video so I can include this new information in the video. So, the first tweet that Arrietty did said, so yes, the drama was about money. I produced and booked a show in Seattle. I invited Irene to come host. She got on the race, as in Drag Race, and got a raise. Cool, I got on the race. All of a sudden, money is tight. Okay, as a producer/booker, I tried to plan a way to divvy up the earnings, which is exactly what show producers do. It's not a crazy or wild concept. Every show producer deals with this. She didn't want to make any changes, and it looks like I was trying to, quote, steal/mess with her money. It was $50, y'all. $50 out of her $1,000. And to be frank, her friends hated me already, so at this point she already had made up her mind about me. She just needed a reason to call it quits. Period. That's the story, so no, it wasn't character. You did that to yourself when you said and did racist bleep, and everyone hated you a while back, remember? And no, it definitely wasn't man, because I'ma be perfectly clear, I F men. I don't F prepubescent children. Let's just say that. I also have plenty of details about both topics if any outlet wants them. Y'all thinking I was aborted? Nah, I was released from my shackles. Someone then asked Arrietty for clarification what she meant by the word prepubescent and does she mean twinks. Arrietty replied saying, I don't know, you tell me. I'm not the one IDing the, quote, boys I'm sleeping with to make sure they're of age. Now, how do you get to that point? Arrietty posted another tweet which was about the racism accusations, which said, and the racism, just ask the POC girls that aren't cool with her now about it. There are many queens that have called her racist in recent years, some still work with her. Someone else then reposted one of Arrietty's tweets asking why none of this information had come to light before Irene called Arrietty out. Arrietty responded saying, great question, because Irene is a scary/intimidating person. She could ruin your drag career in the local bars, and at this point I don't give an F. I will not be silenced. Apparently, one of Irene's drag family members named Norvina Dubois then posted an Instagram story of the meme of Dakota Johnson on Ellen, where she said, actually, no, that's not the truth, Ellen. And people took this to mean that Norvina was saying that what Arrietty had been saying was not true. The main accusation that people then seemed to be asking Arrietty about was the one about prepubescent boys, with people saying that that's a major accusation, and if it's untrue, Irene could sue Arrietty. However, it seems that Arrietty sort of backtracked on that, because she later tweeted saying, okay, those accusations were wild, but we have shown each other our likings/porn. And it was very sus. Her friends have running jokes about her, quote, she's gonna bag a young one, watch out, or, quote, don't let her near any schools. I will say, prepubescent child was crazy though. As I mentioned earlier, Arrietty has since deleted all of these tweets as well as the responses, and there has been backlash against Arrietty since then, with people saying that she was making serious accusations against Irene without providing proof. But that's all we know as of now, so we'll have to wait and see if any more information comes out about this. However, please remember that as usual, my videos are just for informational purposes, so please do not send hate to any of the queens involved and just consume this type of content passively. Going back to Roscoe's, and they talked about the fact that the queens did not do entrance lines on this season like they usually do, because they entered on the main stage rather than in the workroom. DeJa said they did all have entrance lines prepared, so they said them instead when they went back into the workroom. However, apparently, Bosco's entrance line was, quote, can I get a Courvoisier straight up? And Irene said because of Bosco's entrance line, they cut all of the entrance lines. Irene and DeJa didn't confirm the reason, but what I assume happened is, because Courvoisier is a brand of cognac, I assume it's something to do with copyright or product placement rules, and it's common on TV shows that you're not allowed to mention or show brand names unless they're a sponsor of the show, because otherwise you may have to pay a licensing fee to the brand. And there have been previous examples of this on Drag Race which are quite well known. For example, on All Stars 2, during the reading challenge, it's assumed that when Tatiana was reading Alaska, she probably said the name of a Mexican restaurant like Chipotle or Taco Bell. However, because those are brand names, they clearly made Tatiana record part of her sentence again, and you can hear that the word, quote, Mexican has been clearly added in post-production to replace whatever brand name Tatiana apparently said.
Alaska. I finally got to listen to anus, and I get it, because it sounds like what my anus does after eating Mexican.
And if you're interested in more of these Drag Race editing mistakes, I did do a whole video about this, which I'll link to in the description. But back to Roscoe's, and Naysha was asking for some clarification on what's going to happen with the twist that they revealed, which was that one of the eliminated queens gets to come back. Irene explained it, and I think she gave more information than they did in the episode, so I thought it'd be good to share what Irene said. Irene said that each of the regular judges gets to pick one eliminated queen to potentially bring back to the competition. It can be any of the queens, and they can be from any of the brackets. Those queens' names then get put into Bruno's hopper, and one of the queens' names gets chosen, and that queen gets to come back for the finale, so presumably they get to skip the semi-final. Irene said that she thinks it also ended up just being Michelle, Ross and Carson who picked a queen, and the other judges like T.S. Madison and Law Roach were not involved. They then moved on to the Q&A, and one of the questions was, why do we not get reunion episodes anymore, and instead we get lip-sync Lollapaloozas, which are good, but the person asking the question said they miss the messy reunions. Irene said, quote, the girls are too concerned with being liked by the fans, and too afraid to give the drama that the reunions ask for. Irene shared that the last reunion there was on her season, which was season 15, and Irene's story producer said to her, quote, think of this reunion as your audition for All Stars. According to Irene, the season 9 reunion is why Aja and Pheromone got their All-Stars calls, so Irene went into the season 15 reunion, quote, with the intention of making television. But Irene said that not a single other queen on the cast had the same intention. And for example, Mistress was probably holding back because she still thought that she had a chance to win season 15 and didn't want to ruin her chances. Naysha said she has her own theory as to why they don't do reunions anymore, which is that Roscoe's is the only review show that has the queens from the season, and the queens often share backstage tea or explain what really happened when they're at Roscoe's, so there's not really a need for a reunion, and in fact there have been queens who went to reunions in the past and confronted other queens about things that they said at Roscoe's. Naysha mentioned that they sort of rebranded the reunion, and now it's the Bring Back My Girls with T.S. Madison that they do at DragCon. And because it happens quite a long time after the season comes out, there's probably more drama to talk about that's happened in the meantime. Irene also shared some information from the production side, which was, for season 15, at the finale, Anitra accidentally injured one of her dancers and there was a 3-hour delay because of it, and I did talk about this in a previous video. But Irene shared that production want to avoid that sort of thing happening again, so they started filming the finales in-house, and they also have to film the reunion in-house at the same time as the finale, and they only have the studio for a certain amount of time during the year, so they'd have to film the reunion before the season aired, and that would mean there's no point doing a reunion. And lastly, there was a question from an audience member who said they thought the double premiere was stupid, and they asked, would it have been better to alternate each week between the different brackets rather than showing all of the same brackets episodes back to back? DeJa agreed that that would work better, but Irene said no, she doesn't agree. She thinks that doing it the way they're currently doing it spaces the tension out evenly throughout the season, whereas if you alternated between the different brackets each week, the final episodes when the queens find out who makes it to the semi-finals would all come in the 7th, 8th and 9th week. Whereas the current format keeps the quote spikes and tension throughout the season, and it keeps viewership more locked in. DeJa said that she thinks alternating between the brackets would keep the tension more, in her opinion. But Naysha said no because not everyone sticks with the season from beginning to end, and she doesn't think that alternating the brackets would work because usually the first episodes and the final episode are the most watched, and the ones in the middle tend to get lost, and it also gets hard to keep up with what's happening throughout the season. And DeJa said that she thinks that's smart, and she agreed. So there you go, there was the Roscoe's recap for All Stars 10 Episode 3. Do you think it would be better to alternate between the brackets each week, or do you think the current format works better? Let me know in the comments. If you'd like early access to my videos, access to the exclusive Patreon chat, as well as exclusive content, please consider checking out my Patreon. It just costs a few dollars a month and it really helps support the channel. And I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to all of my new Patreon members, as well as my incredible existing Patreon members. Your support is truly so amazing, and I'm thankful every day to have such an amazing community. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate your support more than you know. Please make sure you like and comment on this video to help boost it in the algorithm and promote it to more people. And please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like this video and want to be notified when I post more videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll join me in the future for more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. Thank you so much. Bye.